Let's now have a look at the following response. As you can see here, we have an object which has multiple properties like company ID, region ID, and filters. And filters, you will notice that it's an array. And you can easily notice that because of the square brackets. Now, inside the array, there are three elements. Actually, they are objects themselves. And again, this can be easily inspected by noticing the curly brackets. And these objects themselves have different properties. Now let's imagine in this case that we actually want to check if this object, which has the name manufacturer, has the property isAllowed as false. So in order to do that, we'll first have to parse the response body. So let's define a new variable. And JSON data will contain a JavaScript object after parsing the response body. And for that, we are going to use a Postman function called pm.response.json. Now we have the response body parsed from JSON into a JavaScript object, and this JavaScript object is JSON data. Now, in order to get to this property, we'll have to do a bit of understanding how the objects are built, because you see here you have this JSON data object, which is represented by the first curly bracket, and itself has a property. So by using the console, we'll try to get a bit of understanding on how we can navigate in order to get to the manufacturer object. For that, I'm going to use console log. So we're starting with JSON data. So let's see how it looks. And you will see now that JSON data is actually an object. And it has multiple properties, one of them being the filters array. So let's navigate one level below to the filters array. And in order to navigate the properties, we're going to use a dot and then write the property name, in this case filters. Now you'll see here that we have an array. Now an array is still an object, but you don't see any property names. You will see these keys, and you can still see them as sort of a property names. But in order to access a specific property, you'll have to give this index name. So in our case, we want to access the manufacturer. So in this array, the manufacturer has the index of 2, because in programming, we always start counting from 0. So the first element in the array is with a key 0. The second one is with a key 1. And the third one is with a key 2. In order to access an element from the array, we'll have to open a square bracket and close one. And in between the square brackets, we're going to write the index of that array. And now you'll see that we have an object. Now we wanted to assert that when the name is manufacturer, isAllowed property is set off to false. So let's write a test for that. So let's first save this as a property. We can still log it if you want to. Now let's create a test. We're going to say that manufacturer should not be allowed. I'm gonna open the anonymous function which contains the test. And now we'll write the assertions. First, we want to make sure that manufacturer is actually the object that we got. So the first assertion would be to check the name, and the name must match manufacturer. So pm.expect, gonna take manufacturer.name because this is the name of the property. To equal and it should equal manufacturer. Okay, so the first test is successful. Now let's make sure that this test actually fails. So instead of the key number 2, I'm gonna take key number 1, and this will get me a totally different object. And now you'll see that the test is failing because we're expecting country to deeply equal manufacturer, which is definitely not true. So it looks like we're on the right track. Now, this is basically a fallback to make sure that we are actually having the right object and we're not just asserting a property on any object. Now let's write the assertion that we actually wanted to write, and that is pm.expect manufacturer.is allowed to be false. This test is passing as well. Again, let's make sure that this test fails. I'm gonna switch false with true, and now the test is failing. Now, in this case, the manufacturer will always come up as on the 3rd position in this filters array. But that may not always be the case. So if that is the case, if these properties can change dynamically, or the list is much longer and is not always ordered by a specific name, it's not really reliable in an array to just say this will be always on position number 2. And for that matter, we'll have to find another way to get around this. And for that, we'll have to iterate over this filters array, property by property, object by object, and for each and every object, we'll have to check the name property to see if it matches the manufacturer. And you can see this like sort of a find functionality. Well, we have this array of items, we don't know the position of the array, but we are trying to iterate over it to see it, to find it. So the test that we've written is totally fine, we don't have to change that. But we need to find a different way on how we can get to the manufacturer. So in this case, I'm just gonna remove this definition here and just initialize the variable. And what we're going to do is we want to iterate over the filters array. And we can do that by using the following syntax. We're gonna say for, and we are gonna define here a local variable called filter. And I'm gonna say let filter of JSON data dot filters. Now let's understand a bit what happens. I'm gonna log to the console this new property filter that we just defined here. We want to get a better understanding on what exactly is going on there. So let's clear the console and run this request again. Now, what we have now is that when iterating, we'll have each and every object in that array. And it goes over each element in the array. It just prints out the contents. So again, the syntax is for. We're defining a local variable of, and we are iterating over an array. So JSON data.filters is an array, and this is why this is possible. This is why this syntax works that way. Now, we don't need this for the moment, so I'm just gonna comment it out. And what exactly we're looking for is, now we are having in this filter property, we have access to a specific iteration to the specific object that we are looking for. So the last object that we looked for is this manufacturer. So what we can do actually is to create an if condition inside and say if filter.name equals manufacturer, then let's print the name of the filter. Again, I'm gonna clear my console so just you can see better exactly what's happening. I'm gonna submit a request, and then you'll only see one object. This exact object that we're looking for, the manufacturer. So you've seen that we are iterating over the array, but with this if condition, we can basically zoom in on a specific object that we're interested in. This is a basic if condition, but you can write any other conditions that we want as well. So what we are going to do here is do an assignment. So far manufacturer, as you've seen here, is still null. So nothing has changed and the test is still failing. And we are going to write manufacturer equals filter, because inside this if block, filter is exact name, the exact object that we're looking for. Let's clear this again, submit it again. And now you will see we have an object here. This is the manufacturer. And of course, the test is passing. So these are different strategies on how you can work with objects. So just to recap for a second, we had here an object containing multiple properties, and to access any of these properties, we have to connect them with a dot. So as long as we're dealing with an object, filters, region ID, or company ID is a property of that specific object. So this is why JSON data.filters gives us this property. In this case, this property was an array. So in order to work with arrays, we either use the specific key of the object, and in order to get that, we can just use console log, or we can just count, or even better, or even safer, we can iterate over that array. And only when a specific condition is met, we can basically get that information. Now, it really depends a lot on how big the array is. And in this case, we made the assumption that there is only one manufacturer, so there's only one object matching this condition. As a resource to the lecture, you will find this address with this response body, and I highly recommend you that you try it on your own as well.